Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Casper the Boy Diviner, and today I'm doing the tarot tag, TarotFirsts. This is a tag I kind of came up with when I was inspired by #formative decks. That was a tag done by Kasha of Tarot Map. Even though I kind of missed the whole train, I don't know where I was. I was probably in my own head that whole month. I saw Laura from Aquamarine 18 doing a really good VR, and that inspired me to do a VR as well. As I collected my thoughts on all the decks I wanted to cover, I realized they were all firsts of some sort. So this is why I came up with this tag, #TarotFirsts. If you're interested in joining in, just talk about all the decks that were a first in your journey, like some sort of milestone or some sort of realization or something you used first. You can take inspiration from some of the firsts that I have in this video. Traditionally, we always talk about the first decks we have ever had, and I think this is not a stranger. I've covered this deck many times, and this is the original RWS. And I really don't like this coloring. It is so hideously yellow. And it has a mottled backing. This is not because it's old, it's just because this is how it is. It's meant to be an original, you know what I mean? It's meant to be from the museum or something. Just untouched, not retouched. The colors are just like this. And this was my first deck, and I'm not... Usually when I hear stories about people's first decks, it tends to be some sort of transformation. People really are happy or really open their eyes up to the tarot. But I really tried to study this deck, and I just couldn't gel with it. So my first deck wasn't something that I'm particularly proud of, or it's not something that I really want to use. So that is my first deck, and that was my first entry into the tarot world. So I was feeling a bit discouraged. Am I not suited for this? Am I not suited for the tarot? Am I supposed to study something else? We can talk about why I wanted to study the tarot, but I think that is a topic for another video where I want to talk about my tarot history, where I come from, how I progressed through the years. The first deck that I actually started using and using well is the Line Strider Tarot deck by Ciolo Thompson. Here is the Line Strider Tarot deck, and it is pretty old. This was the first deck I started using after the original RWS, and I realized, hey, like, I can get along with this. This deck is not that bad. It came with a really meaty guidebook as well that really helped studying it. So I really liked that. I was like, oh my god, this is how using a deck should feel like. You should feel inspired. You should feel happy with the imagery you're getting. You should be inspired by what's happening in the card, rather than the original RWS, which made me feel tired, made me feel lethargic, made me dread reading. This deck actually made me think a lot more. Even though some of the images I wouldn't say are beginner friendly, it really pushed my boundaries to think about what tarot is like. And this deck is the first deck that I started using, so it's also the first deck that I really made me realize how important aesthetics are in deck art. So I found out that I need to find decks that speak to me on image level, or else it would be really hard for me to use. And actually looking through this deck is giving me a bit of chills because there's so many memories from 4 or 5 years ago just exploring this deck. Yeah. So this is the Line Strider deck, the deck that I actually started using and started studying with. Good memories. After the Line Strider deck, I wanted to push my boundaries a bit. I wasn't very good at reading it, to be honest. I wasn't well versed in the RWS, but I wanted to push myself, and I bought my first indie deck. And my first indie deck is also not a stranger to this channel. If you watch me anytime, this is the Personal Space Tarot. The Personal Space Tarot is by Emily Graverson, and it is a very beautiful deck, but it's not an easy deck to read at all. This made me feel a bit off-center as well, because some of the imagery is so beautiful. This is why I bought the deck, because at that point in time, I didn't really believe the woo-woo part of tarot. I just wanted to comfort myself because I was going through a lot. So this deck was so comforting. Even the 4 of Coins, which, you know, in the RWS, there's a man who doesn't look that happy. He's holding everything to himself. This deck makes everything feel so gentle. I really like the color scheme. I really like how simple it is. So far, my first few decks were all really minimal. You know what I'm saying? But this deck really pushed me to think, like, wow, this is really a difficult deck. This is not an easy deck. And this is how we read indie decks. Indie decks can vary so much. I guess it's because in the mass market deck, the publisher really does have a bit of a more experience about what is easier for the masses to learn and the masses to use. And with the indie deck creator, you don't really have that kind of barrier. You just do what you want and what feels right. And this is the first time I felt like this deck was not easy. She made a few changes as well. The chariot is the archer, I think, or the arrow, I think it's the archer. And the tower is the mountain, which is very similar to the Lenormand meaning of the mountain. So it's really interesting. I did enjoy this deck, and I still do. I just felt like this was the first indie deck I got, and it was not easy, and made me feel a bit it made me feel interested in getting more, and also made me curious whether I could push my boundaries or whether this is it for me. If you get what I'm saying. After this deck, to be honest, all my card stock didn't feel great. They felt functional. Felt meh, I would say, so far of all the decks I owned. When I got the Wild Unknown Tarot, this really blew my mind because the card stock is so good. Still holds up so well to this day and age. This was the first time I felt like shuffling was really a great experience, and I felt like shuffling was important in my practice. So this was the first deck that made me river shuffle, made me realize that I can do so much more. And that shuffling is a way for me to connect. This is when I started becoming more woo-woo, I would say, with the tarot. When I got the Wild Unknown. So it made me realize how important cardstock can be, and that made me explore different kinds of cardstock. The imagery also is very minimalist but really interesting. I really enjoyed doing readings with this deck. The sad part is that my deck came a bit they cut it too close to one side for most of the cards, but still it still holds up today. And even though I know there's been some like, oh, this deck is overhyped, they forget the context where this deck comes from. They forget that this deck was really pivotal in the tarot world. It really opened everyone's minds about what a mass market deck could be, because this was an indie deck, you know what I mean, where the creator had all the say, and then there was a publisher that actually took the chance on them. And this is why probably now more and more publishers actually go for indie creators and say, hey, we're going to give you a mass market offer, a contract, and it's all thanks to the Wild Unknown. Yeah, beautiful deck. And this was the first deck that really made me realize how important cardstock can be in your practice. I want to talk about the first giveaway I actually won, and this was the Tabula Mundi Minima. So this was actually a giveaway done by Darren Griffin, which I think is close friends with Mel Meline and T. Susan Chang, who are the creators of this. Mel Meline created this deck, but that's also when I found out about T. Susan Chang and made me realize how much I enjoyed her as a person, and Mel Meline as well, but T. Susan Chang a bit more, I guess, Asian pride, you know. But this deck was really formative because this is the first time I got a esoteric tarot deck, and I got it in the giveaway, so it felt like it was meant to be. Do you know what I mean? Like Serendipity, or I don't know, I just felt like this was the first deck that was so esoteric, and it came for me for free due to the generosity of these people. But there's something out there telling me to dive deeper into the unknown, dive deeper into the esoteric. And this was the first time I really try to study the Thoth. So this was really formative in that sense. Even though I'm still not good at the Thoth, this really made me think about the decans, opened my mind up to so many things. And I'm getting so many chills just looking at the imagery because it's been so long since I used this deck. I felt like this deck was difficult to read just because it's so esoteric. But that's why it's so good, right? This was the first time I felt like, wow, I can get into this. I can do all this witchcraft stuff. My brain can handle all this, I believe. I felt like I was ready because I got this deck, because this deck was given to me for free, and it was something I won. Even though I would say there were about 10 people who won, I really appreciate it because I would not have gotten this deck. I wouldn't have paid for it to give it a chance because it was so scary. It's so scary to tackle something deeper and darker. If you have seen all my decks so far, they were all minimalist, right? That I covered so far, the Line Strider, the Personal Space Tarot, the Wild Unknown, they were difficult to read because they were so minimalist. And even though that worked for me as an aesthetic, this was the first deck that made me feel like, hey, like more imagery, more complexity actually helps my readings. Even though I didn't do that well with this deck just because the Thoth was so unknown to me, I still get so tripped up by the right way of having what is the argument for justice and strength, being swapped. That one, up to this day, I can't really explain it well, and I feel like I understand it, but maybe not fully. If anyone is interested in that, you can read Lon Milo Duquette's book about understanding the Thoth Tarot. I think it really explains it well. So because of this deck, my mind opened up to spirituality, right? I wanted to work with more magic stuff. So I got a reading from Avalon Cameron about what kind of spirits were calling out to me, what kind of deities might be calling out to me, and the deity that connected through her was Apollo, and that really touched me, and that made me think about how I want to communicate better with him. This is the reason why I bought the Persephone Tarot. So this was meant for me to work with Apollo. My relationship with Apollo I haven't worked as much as I would like. I've bought books about Greek magic now. I'm going to try my best to develop a new ritual just to get in touch with Apollo, Apollo. Yeah, it's still an ongoing process, and this was the deck I was dedicating to communicating with him. Even though it's Persephone, of course, but she is a Greek goddess, so this deck is really about Greek mythology. A new version of this deck was released after, and I kind of regretted getting this one because I kind of preferred the color scheme of the other one better. But still, this is a very quirky, cute deck, and I really appreciate it, and that's why every time I want to let it go, I just can't seem to. There's something about me, working through my spirituality with this, thinking about how to communicate with the divine, and that includes Apollo. Yeah. And of course, I tried my best. I'll be like, show me Apollo if you're really connected in the next 5 cards, and sometimes he doesn't appear. So I think I still need to work on my relationship with him, and maybe not through this deck first, maybe through dedication, through prayer. But this was the first deck that I bought, looking to do ritual with. Look at how beautiful it is. How cute it is. I every time I see this deck, I feel like it's such a waste that I'm not using it more. Of course, in person, because of the age, there are some like spots on the black, and that's why I kind of wish I got her next edition, because the next edition is white and red and it's matte. This one is a bit glossy. It's a mattish gloss, but still I really like this deck. I can't let go of it for some reason. I think it's just because of that sentimental value. When I was having the Persephone Tarot, I already started reading for people, and I wanted to cover the first deck that I used to read for others, and it is actually the Sasrabido Tarot. I feel like this deck is perfect for reading for others because it's so gentle, and yet it is still colorful, it is still expressive, it still has all the imagery you need to do a reading. So if I were to use the line strider, sometimes the meanings were a bit limited just because I didn't see enough in the images. And when I'm doing readings with the Tableau Mundi, for myself already, I felt a bit intimidated. This deck felt friendly and yet colorful enough, and also full of imagery. And this was my first deck that I started to do readings for. I don't really like taking photos with this deck just because it is so glossy. But doing readings in person, using this deck was great. I still use this for readings when I do relationship readings. I feel like there are so many layers of relationships that actually gone through this deck just because I've been using it for so many years for all my clients. This is my go-to cards for relationship readings. I have since pivoted a bit, changed a bit, maybe started using a bit of other decks just to see how it goes. But this has always been my default. And I really enjoy this deck. This deck really opened my eyes up and really gave me confidence to do readings in person or also remotely. Made me feel confident as a reader for others and not just for myself. So when I started the tarot, it was meant to be self-work. It was meant to be for me to cope with whatever I was going through. And slowly going into the esoteric, the Tableau Mundi, going into spiritual work with the Persephone Tarot, made me feel like, I'm not just doing a psychological reading for myself to help myself, but actually I can communicate with the divine to help others, and this is why this deck was so pivotal. This was the first deck that I used to read for others, the Sasrabido. The next deck I wanted to talk about is after I created my channel and started being more dedicated to it, and it's the Stellar Tarot. Why I wanted to talk about this, because this is the first deck that made me a friend. So Valerie, if you're watching this, you always support me, thank you so much. I'm still behind on your videos, I kind of knew Valerie because Joanne from Secret Space Japan and Anake from Nobody's Here, I don't know what her channel name is now, I can't remember, but somehow I kind of felt like there was someone commenting on their videos and they were actually Singaporean, and they actually reached out to me, and I went for the tarot meetup the first time, and it was a very strange experience. But Valerie reached out to me after telling me that she was there and I didn't hang out with her, so we talked online. I'm not a person who really likes to meet in person. I kind of am okay with just pure online friendships, but she told me she was planning to get a backup of the Stellar Tarot and whether I wanted to share shipping with her, and I said yes. And it's been That's why this deck has always been sentimental to me, because I really enjoy the imagery. I felt like this was a perfect match between RWS and Thoth. That's the first thing. But the second thing is this gave me a friend. Basically, I met up with Valerie to exchange to get the deck. And we talked about the decks we owned, and I felt a connection, and I'm still happy that we're still friends right now. It feels like it's been years, and I feel like we might have been friends for years, maybe a year or two. I really don't know. So this deck has always had a special place in my heart. I wish there was a bigger version, but just holding it right now gives me the chills, makes me feel like glad that I have this deck and that I managed to make a good friend out of it. And of course, through Valerie, I met other friends as well. So I'm still very happy that we are still connected. After the Stellar Tarot, I collected a lot of different decks. But then let's fast forward a bit to the deck that made me feel the most when I got it. Like, out of all the decks I received and I enjoyed all of this, I think there's only one deck that really made me feel wow. Like, this really speaks to me after I read the little zine that came with it, and it is the Bhutan Tarot, or the Bhutan Tarot, I think. Because I've been putting on an American accent when I talk on the video, I feel like Tan is very American and Tan is very Chinese or very British. So this is the Bhutan Tarot because it's an Asian deck. It's by A. Miyako. And this deck just made me have so many feels when I first received it. If you are curious to know, you can watch my first impressions and talk about this deck. But even the cardstock, everything feels so good. I don't use it as often now, and I don't know why. It's just because I've received so many new decks to try out. But this deck is still the one that impacted me the most once I opened it. I was like, I really like this deck. I really enjoy this deck. It is minimalist enough to appeal to my minimalist aesthetics, but it's colorful enough. It has enough backstory because of the zine for me to really understand and appreciate it. I would say maybe the weakest part of this deck would be the majors, just because they were designed first, especially the celestial bodies. Those are the three cards that I don't really speak to in this deck, but overall this deck is as close to a soul deck for me out of all my decks. So this is the first deck that I felt like wow. Yeah, I'm sure that there are new decks that will come and that will also impact me as much. I mean, I'm really enjoying the Lubanko Tarot, the Blood Moon Tarot, the Prisma Visions, recently all the new decks that I've got. But this deck will always hold a special place in my heart because it really spoke to me once I received it. For the next two first, they might be a bit negative, so just be prepared. I wanted to say the first deck that really made me feel like there are types of decks that I really cannot get along with, even though I keep them because of the art. But it is I would say it's a deck deterrent now. Rose petal finishes are really not my friend. I really cannot take it. And the deck I wanted to talk about is the True Black Tarot because it is so beautiful. You can watch a walkthrough of it on my channel. So beautiful. The write-up in the book is so good, but the cardstock is so bad and it was so hard for me to use. Firstly, it's very, very thick, so it's really a thick stack. There's no way to riffle shuffle it, no way at all, for me, with my tiny hands. And maybe because I got the previous edition, when I shuffled my friend's edition, it didn't feel so bad. I got the edition where the Hierophant is still misspelled. So it's really hard to shuffle, really hard to riffle shuffle, really hard to shuffle. It's been so difficult to unstick cards when I actually deal them out. And I know Arthur Wang put a lot of heart into it. He actually hand edges every deck. But wow, I wish it wasn't in this cardstock. I honestly do, because I like it so much. I don't have it because I left it in the office for my daily readings there, but the office shut down because of COVID, so I haven't been able to go back to collect it. But instead, I have another one that made me even more determined. This wouldn't be sort of a first, but it's a confirmation, and it's the Children of Litha. I really like the imagery here as well. I got the black edition, which has the same rose petal finish that is so hard to shuffle. And even though I really like this deck and I love the imagery so much, it is so beautiful. Look at Judgment and the trumpet, the horn, and the Six of Pentacles. I know the rose petal finish should ease with time, and I wouldn't say it's that bad now because I've shuffled it a lot. But that initial use, the first like maybe 20 times you use it, or even 100 times you use it, it's not easy. And even now it feels If you see, yeah, I'm not doing that on purpose. I'm not doing that to prove a point. It's just not easy for me. So I'm going to try my best to refrain from getting rose petal finishes from now on, and hope that creators release it in a more friendly fashion. I really like decks like the new Prisma Visions, the Bhutan Tarot. Those decks have perfect, great cardstock. The Lubanko Tarot is also great. So this is the first deck. The True Black is the first deck that made me realize the tactile nature is more important than I thought. So the first time was the Wild Unknown. It opened my eyes up to what good cardstock can do for me. And then the True Black was the one that opened my eyes to realize how bad cardstock can do for me, or a cardstock that doesn't suit to my taste. So that was really interesting. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is not a positive one either, even though I like this deck, and honestly there's nothing wrong with this deck, but it's the first deck that made me realize, am I over collecting? Am I saturating myself with so much tarot that I feel bogged down? And it's the TarotFirsts. It is a wonderful deck. I really like this deck. Okay, so it's no fault of this deck. It just so happens that this was the one that was at the tipping point for me. When I received it, I felt overwhelmed. I felt like, how should I use this? When should I use this? I have so many decks already. How can this fit into my practice? And all these questions that came into my mind. And there's no problem for someone who is collecting tarot for the sake of collecting. Like, you don't want to use all the decks. You don't need to use all your decks. But I feel guilt having things that I don't use, especially tarot. Because, yeah. And up till now, I haven't used this tarot deck as much as I would like. Even though I really like the cardstock. But there's something about, I don't know. I really like the cardstock, and I really like the imagery. I just think when I saw it on the pictures, it seemed a bit less yellow. So this makes me think about the first deck I own. It made me think about, you know, am I over collecting? Am I collecting for the sake of collecting? Which is okay for some people, just not that okay for me. Yeah, still a beautiful deck. This was the first one that made me start thinking. So every deck I ordered after this one made me feel a bit of guilt. Some decks like the Philosophy Tarot, like the Curious Travels Tarot deck, all those I still feel guilt about, you know what I'm saying? Some I'm not so sure, like the Lubanko Tarot, I felt a bit of guilt buying it, but I'm so glad I got it. So that's a constant struggle. And this was the first deck that made me feel like, you know, I should be considering a bit more. I should be thinking a little bit more before I order something. I should be thinking more about my impulses, you know what I mean? Okay, so that was a whirlwind that showed you so many decks. I feel good about this video. I was struggling to think about good topics and something that wasn't too difficult for me to do, because a lot of the topics I chose for myself are a bit heavy, like my tarot journey or the spiritual tools that I use. But this one felt good, and I felt good doing this video. So if you enjoyed my video, if you enjoyed watching this, please leave a like and subscribe. If you're doing a VR to this, also comment. I would love to know if you're doing a VR so I can watch your video. And yeah, you guys have a great rest of the day. You take care. Bye!